Hi everyone, welcome to this interview with Tobiana Dirk of Kelly's Cause Foundation. I'm going to read a short description about the organization so I can do justice to exactly what they do. Kelly's Cause Foundation is a charity based in London dedicated to securing the mental health of hospitality industry workers by offering training in mental health first aid. And Tobiana moved to London from Australia to train as a chef, and she will shortly tell you more about her journey. But I just wanted to say that I've done one of their courses, the mental health awareness course, and it was really very useful. I learned a lot, and it simplified the issue of mental health a lot. So I encourage you to take a look at their courses. Welcome, Tobiana. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to set a context for the interview, I wanted to open up a conversation around work-life balance, just because it's kind of like the elephant in the room, something that affects all areas of our work and life, but we don't talk enough about it. And sort of three perspectives come to mind. If you're an employee, you sort of relate it to your rota and the amount of free time you get. And my opinion is that you can't wait for a better rota to ensure your mental and physical well-being. Mm-hmm. As an employer, you might feel that work-life balance might affect the team ethic, but you also run the risk of team members showing up with a time bomb ticking in some other parts of their lives. And our culture encourages, well, martyrdom, self-sacrifice. So we have that message as well, which is making, I think all these three things put together make work-life balance a topic that we don't have much clarity about or how to handle. And I wanted to bring your wisdom to the conversation and your experience as well, as a trainer and a chef.
Yeah, so I think that it's like about boundaries, right? So like it's, you know, what kind of boundaries we can put in place ourselves about what we're willing to kind of give and work. And I think that those are something that gets so blurred when we work in hospitality, because there is such an idea of like, it's almost like a competition between who's working the most hours and who's the most stressed and who's had the most things, you know, kind of happen and go wrong, and, you know, things that they've had to deal with. So we've created this kind of workplace culture where it's like a competition. But I think what we're starting to slowly see is a change away from that, where people are saying, well, no, it's not actually a badge of honor to be saying like, oh, I worked 90 hours last week. Actually, that's ridiculous, and nobody can survive long term by doing that. So I think that, you know, there is very slowly and like definitely too slowly that kind of change away from that culture towards that. And I think from an employer point of view, the idea that, you know, you can only have chefs working 50, 60, 70 hours a week to be able to make a rota work is just completely outdated and wrong. There are plenty of examples of businesses now that are doing, you know, not making people work doubles, or if they do make them work doubles, ensuring that they have 3 days off a week, ensuring that people have 2 days off in a row together, all of those kind of things. But I think like culturally, the idea of a work-life balance is something that has always eluded the hospitality industry. But fingers crossed that this year, and maybe certainly know of some people who after lockdown haven't gone back into the industry because they've been like, oh wow, this is what it feels like to be a normal human, where I don't work myself into the ground week on week until I can't cope anymore. So I think that, you know, having to kind of slow down and be at home more and kind of reduce the pace that we live our life at has definitely kind of highlighted how there are issues. And I know that there are plenty of restaurants now that are, you know, maybe opening less, trying to employ more chefs to have more people on the rota and stuff like that. So I think the change is happening, but I think it has to come from both sides. So it has to come from employers being like, no, we're not going to make our staff work this many hours, but it also has to come from employees standing up to themselves. I know I've had a couple of people, and one person in particular springs to mind who's done one of our mental health first aid courses, who said afterwards he then went back and was like, hang on a second, like, I'm not helping work or myself by working these hours. I'm not being productive while I'm doing it. I'm not looking after myself. So I think just having that awareness of how much that kind of work-life balance and mental health tie in with each other is kind of going to hopefully help bring about that change even more. But it kind of needs to come from employees standing up and saying, no, I'm actually not going to do that. And then also the employers changing the way that they kind of work rotas and stuff.
Yeah. And from your own experience, how did you handle this challenge of work-life balance?
I think when my last job before I took a year out to do Kelly's Cause full time was in theory supposed to be 3 days off a week, but as a head chef that just never happened, and it always meant that the only way I could catch up on all my admin and invoicing, rotas, ordering, all of that stuff I had to do inevitably meant that I worked on my days off. So then what I basically did was any time that I could afford to take some time out of the kitchen. And that is kind of the way, unfortunately, the way that it is, because loads of places are always understaffed, that you end up picking up the slack of other people. I think I was pretty good at putting my foot down and being like, no, I'm just not, like, here's my boundaries. I'm not gonna work beyond that. But that's obviously easier to do when you're in a more senior role. Obviously, as like a commie chef coming up, it's quite hard to, a lot of places would just be like, okay, well, get out then, like, we'll find somebody else. So I think kind of changing that culture is really important. And then I think another thing that really helped me was making sure that I had friends and people that I spent time with who were outside of hospitality. Because I think what can really happen and what makes that work-life balance line so blurred is when you spend your whole time with the people that you work with, which is great, don't get me wrong. Like, that is one of the great things about hospitality, is it becomes like your family, and that sense of kind of camaraderie that you have with the people you work with. And it's great to also stay and have a drink after work. But I think when you're spending all of your time either working or spending time with the people you work, then that kind of work-life balance gets and those lines and boundaries get very blurry. So I think kind of setting those boundaries and then making sure that you do things that are outside of work and with different people is really important.
I like that, your perspective, what information you take in, and how you pay attention to how that makes you pay attention to what you're doing and the way you're leading your life. It's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you hang out with people from work all the time, you inevitably just end up talking about work, and it just then feels like your whole life is about work. So I think that's one of those kind of things that can be really helpful.
Yeah. And what was your journey, just as an introduction, what was your journey to creating Kelly's Cause Foundation?
So I started Kelly's Cause, well, officially we've been a registered charity for just over a year now. But the idea is kind of something I've been working on for probably close to 2.5 years now, I'd say. So I met Kelly, we studied at Cordon Bleu together, became really good friends, we spent loads of time together at school, hanging out on the weekends, like spending loads of time together for the 6 months that we were at Cordon Bleu together. And then we both went off after we graduated to work in different London restaurants, and still kept in touch and would catch up quite a lot to, discuss the most kind of ridiculous thing that we'd had to do in the kitchen for that week. And then Kelly very sadly took her own life when she was just 23. So she did have her struggles and experiences of mental health before working in hospitality, but it was working in hospitality that kind of pushed her over the edge. And it was probably, in fact, it was the last time I saw her before she died that she said to me, she's like, oh, I realized that working in a professional kitchen is not for me. She was like, I just can't. She basically was saying, like, I can't handle the pressure. And at the time I was thinking, oh, it's really sad that we're losing very talented chefs, because she was an incredibly talented chef. Like, she just had the natural ability that I was so envious of, because she was so disorganized and always running late, but she just had such a natural ability. Like, she was so good. And I was like, it's very sad that we're losing talented young chefs because they don't feel like the industry is a place where they can thrive. And then obviously that was kind of, increased tenfold after she had taken her own life. So I then thought, we've got a real problem in this industry where, we have loads of people experiencing poor mental health, people with diagnosed mental health issues, and we're not talking about it. We're not doing anything about it. We're so far, as an industry, we're so far behind the rest of the world, like the corporate world, finance, banking, lawyers, all of those kind of things. Big businesses have had mental health first aid training in place for years, and, have had a big focus on mental health policies and mental well-being. And, even if it is something token, like offering yoga classes or free therapy or stuff like that, like hospitality is so far behind everybody else. So I basically was like, what's the most kind of practical action focused thing we can do? Because people who work in hospitality are very practical people. You know, they need to kind of see something that they can do and things that they can change. So that's how we came to do mental health first aid training specifically, because it's MHFA is like an accredited course. It's very science like based and evidence backed. And very practical. So yeah, that's kind of how Kelly's Cause came about. I was working on it for like a year while also working full-time as a head chef. And then I thought I need to practice what I preach because I can't be doing basically 2 full-time jobs at once. So I then took a year out of the kitchen to just focus on Kelly's Cause full-time. And then obviously 2020 happened and everything kind of got put on hold. But luckily we've managed to kind of switch to doing online training. So we've still been able to reach some people and train them in those skills, and now going back to in-person courses. So yeah, that's kind of like the journey of Kelly's Cause.
And I think what's valuable is that you come from that context of hospitality, and anyone who takes the course understands and will be able to relate to the material because you've made it accessible to anyone in this industry. So that's
yeah, good, absolutely. So everybody who works at Kelly's Cause has worked in the hospitality industry. So, you know, everybody has that lived experiences. We've changed the course in some aspects, like we have hospitality specific case studies, and obviously they're like very interactive courses. So a lot of it is around group discussion and breaking off into small groups and doing you know, different kind of activities. And when you have a room full of hospitality professionals, obviously then the conversation steers more towards hospitality specific examples. So yeah, I didn't think that we could just go into hospitality businesses with some kind of really corporate training, because, you know, people wouldn't understand. When I went to do my MHFA instructor training, it was like all other 14 people in my group all already worked as like instructors and deliverers of training in different areas. And I was like, sorry, what's a delegate? And they were like, what? And I was like, I'm a chef. I don't know any of this kind of side of things. So I think kind of having that experience and that understanding of what it's really like in the industry means that I can, you know, personalize my training to be effective rather than being some kind of corporate training that, you know, people, chefs especially, aren't going to take on board.
And do you see work-life balance as a challenge to good mental health, and where does it fit in with, especially related to the work of Kelly's Cause?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the two things go hand in hand, because I think like the kind of issues we have in hospitality are two-sided. So it's the fact that, yes, it's a really stressful work environment. You know, we're under a lot of pressure, whether you're working in the kitchen, behind a bar, on the floor. I feel actually like we often underestimate how difficult it is for people working on the floor, especially now, who have to deal with customers, because I mean, I've done a few shifts on the floor and I'm always like, get me back behind the pass. Like, I don't want to be customer facing. People are just rude and horrible. So I think it's, you know, you're either working in the kitchen with cranky chefs, or, you know, you're having to deal with cranky customers, rude people. And then, you know, you've also got the really long hours. You've got the very easy access to alcohol and drugs and the whole kind of culture around that, which is obviously really dangerous. And then the flip side of that is that you've taken away everybody's time to do the things they need to do to look after themselves. So you can't just, you know, having positive mental health isn't just about the absence of a mental health issue. You know, we talk about kind of mental wealth a little bit more now, which is about making sure we're being, you know, if I think about zero, like that's the baseline, and anything below that is mental illness or poor mental health. But we don't want to just be on the baseline. We want to be somewhere well above that. So all of those things that we need to do to look after ourselves, like sleeping well, having enough sleep, exercising, eating well, not just eating well, but actually eating like proper meals every day, you know, mindfulness, meditation, journaling, if those things work for people, you know, catching up with friends and family, all of those things that we need to do to kind of maintain a basic level of good mental health is kind of stripped away from us when we work 60, 70 hours a week in hospitality, and we're working all weekends and all evenings and things like that. So I think it is, and unfortunately there's not just like a really simple solution to it, right? You know, we're not just suddenly going to not be able to work weekends and not be able to work evenings, but it is about, I think that's why I love how you said about the work-life balance, because it's just about finding balance. And for some people that's going to be different to others. But and you know, it's kind of probably going to be something that we're always going to constantly be working on to try and achieve. But yeah, I think it goes completely hand in hand with mental health.
I think that's important, that you'll always be working on it. It's not something that you fix with one box ticked: yoga or mindfulness or meditation or good nutrition. It's like, it's an ongoing process. And especially in an industry where we can very easily fall on the other end of the scale and neglect everything. So
yeah, absolutely. The same with our mental health. You know, it's something that we need to be actively working on all the time to kind of stay mentally healthy.
Do you have any one piece of advice? I'm sure you have a lot of tips to share.
I think that my one piece of advice for this year and in the current circumstances is just be kind to yourself and be easy on yourself, because I think, especially for people who work in hospitality, we're used to being very productive, we're used to seeing, and this is something that I found when I stepped out of being in the kitchen, and I think has been amplified for a lot of people on furlough this year, is that we're so used to being productive and achieving things and, you know, churning out plates of food, serving customers, whatever it is. That means that we kind of see the fruits of our labor straight away. And then I think for a lot of people in furlough, you know, everybody was trying to learn all these new skills and do all these things. And then quite quickly, people felt kind of burnt out from that. And there was a lot of kind of comparison of like, oh, this person is doing this with their furlough, like when I'm sitting around and binging 12 hours of Netflix a day. And I think that it's just about survival. Like this year is literally just about survival. And I think the biggest part of that is just not comparing yourself to what other people are doing and being really kind to yourself, which is, to be honest, a constant battle that I have as well, because on days when I just feel like I'm not being productive, I'm like beating myself up and I'm like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And then I stop and I think, and I'm like, it's because this year is really, really difficult. Like we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Our industry is in tatters. You know, our friends are losing jobs left, right, and center. We can't do all the things we want to do. We can't hug our family, our friends. We can't see people. And I think just like being really kind and gentle to yourself is probably my number one piece of advice. And if you feel like you're not being productive, that's absolutely fine.
This is like work-life balance. When you take the work away, what happens?
Yes.
How do you feel avoid?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. And for employers, do you have any advice for employers? One thing that they can do to support the work-life balance and therefore well-being of their teams?
I think the biggest thing is communication. I do harp on about it a lot, but I think communication, and the thing that has set apart the workplaces and the businesses that have showed they care about their staff and looked after their staff during furlough, and those that haven't, is communication. Like I know, for example, some businesses that were sending out emails to all their staff every day, you know, making sure, doing all of these kind of activities, keeping them engaged. And then I know other people who work in businesses where they didn't hear a single word from their employer for 4 or 5 months. And to me, that is just completely unacceptable. So I think the biggest thing is communication, and it's a two-way street. It's about asking for feedback from your employees about what it is that they want, you know, what will work for you, and doing that with each individual person who works in your business, because a one-size-fits-all approach is not going to work. And that's basically kind of like, you know, what in the corporate world they talk about like flexible working. So it's like, you know, sitting down with everybody and being like, right, okay, not just what can we do to improve your performance, but what can we do to help you as a human rather than just an employee. And yeah, just it's all about communication and asking what it is that will work for each individual person, rather than thinking that the same approach is going to kind of work for everybody.
Do you have a sense for what's on the table for employers for next year in terms of supporting their staff? And
yeah, I think it's going to be difficult, because I think it's the unknown that's so hard for everybody to deal with. And like I totally get that for, you know, for businesses this is a really, really scary time. You know, you've got to look after your own business, you've got to look after yourself, you've got to look after your employees. But I think that well, obviously having trained mental health first aiders and having people who have those skills in mental health and looking after people's mental health is really, really important, because again, that like they can help you take care of that communication aspect a little bit. So by having trained mental health first aiders, your employees also have someone else to kind of go to who's maybe not your typical kind of head chef, exec chef, or general manager or HR person. So someone within the business that they can go to. So obviously I would encourage everybody and businesses to kind of invest in that. But I think it is still going to just be, and I think admitting as a business that you don't really know what's happening as well can be really good, to just being like, you know, we don't know what the future holds, but like whatever happens, we're going to support you. I think that that's something that employers can do. And I think, again, it's about that being communicative, but also being really honest and open and transparent about things, because something that can bring people a lot of anxiety is like when they don't know what's going on. So that kind of transparency in how things are running within a business and stuff like that, I think is going to be really, it's always really important, but it's going to be even more important as we kind of go forward into 2021, which is hopefully better.
Yes, we're all hoping. Thank you very much. Just as a final question, where can members of the Love Letters to Chefs community find out about the training and the work that you offer? Is it the website?
Yeah, so kellyscause.com is our website, and that's a great place you can sign up for our newsletter, or you can sign up for interest in specific courses that we have available. Also, I would say probably the other next best spot is to follow at Kelly's Cause on Instagram. That's probably the place that we post the most, even though I have a tortured relationship with Instagram because I feel like it's also terrible for your mental health, but I think using it in the right way is good. So, you know, we post about all our upcoming courses on there, post some kind of tips and tricks for looking after your mental health, and do some kind of spotlight on some of our change makers who have already done the training and are kind of working in the industry to make it better and more mentally healthy for everyone. So yeah, the website and Instagram are the best two places to follow along.
Thank you, Tobian, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was lovely to chat with you.
To chat with you too. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.